welcome to this edition of the conversation on this, the 6th of February. My name is Blaise Bryant. I'm joined via telephone this week by Pete Iorizzo. Pete is the sports editor of the Albany Times Union. He graduated from Syracuse University in 2004. He took a job covering rodeo out in Idaho as soon as he got out of college for about a year. Came back to Albany, to the Times Union, and worked covering Siena basketball for a few years. And he is now the sports editor, and it is a great pleasure to welcome Pete Iorizzo to the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Anytime, Blaise. Thanks a lot for thinking of me.
Hey, of course, and it's great that, you're able to flex around the weather from yesterday, and we're here, and it seems like most of the snow has gone away, and that leads me into the first thing that I want to talk about, Pete, is the Super Bowl. Everyone was worried about what seemed like there was going to be a snowstorm, and luckily the Super Bowl happened about 18 hours before then.
Yeah, I think everybody still recognizes, though, the perils of trying to have a Super Bowl in the winter weather, just because of what a close call it was. And the people who recognize that the most are probably all the people who came from Seattle and Denver and had their flights canceled the next day because, there was a snowstorm and they couldn't get out of town.
Yeah, and all the people that were stuck in the New Jersey transit stations, it didn't seem like they handled things all that well either.
No, it seemed like there was kind of a disaster on that front, too. I was at the Super Bowl a few years ago when the Giants played the Patriots in Indianapolis. And I can tell you, a small city like Indianapolis was just you couldn't have imagined a more perfect place to have the event. It's the stadium is very well located there. It's right downtown, so anybody who was staying in the immediate downtown area could really just walk to the game. So that was obviously extremely convenient, and when it's in a small city too, it's the biggest thing going on there at that time. So everything that happened in Indianapolis that week was geared around the Super Bowl. Whereas when you have it somewhere like the tri-state area near New York City, that it doesn't quite happen. Sort of, life sort of goes on, and the Super Bowl is just sort of a part of that, as opposed to being the center of everything happening.
Sure. And when you went to Indianapolis, were you covering it, or did you go as a fan?
No, I was there covering it.
Okay. I obviously, since you were covering it, I'm sure you were probably rooting for one team or another, weren't you?
Just rooting for a good game and rooting for it to not go into overtime or anything, because game ends pretty late and we have deadlines. So, rooting for a good game and a fast game.
So when a sporting event goes into overtime like that, your deadline doesn't change?
It doesn't, no. The paper has to come out when it comes out, so it gets to everybody's driveway at the appropriate time the next morning. Sometimes we can fudge it by 10 or 15 minutes if we need to, but really that's about it. If a game goes on until, a few years ago there was a Union hockey game, for instance, that went 5 overtimes. I think it ended at like 1:30 in the morning or something. It just, it wasn't in the paper the next day. There's nothing you can do about it. There's so much involved in the production standpoint, from running the press to getting the newspaper distributed to all the driveways and the newsstands and everywhere it's got to go, that, you really can't throw off the timing of all that by very much.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And luckily, anyone that was reporting the Super Bowl and covering it, they didn't have to worry about an overtime this year.
No, it's great. If you're the one benefit to covering a blowout, if you're a reporter writing on deadline, is you can certainly get the story going in the third or fourth quarter there, because the outcome was not in doubt.
Or even halftime in this instance.
Yes, yeah, that too.
Although I would imagine reporters from the Denver Post were not too happy. I was looking at some of the coverage, and they just blasted them.
Well, if you're a sports writer or a sports columnist, your job is to call it like it is, and it was what it was. Most of the country saw it on on television. So.
And you talk about sports writing and all that sort of thing. How did you get into this field?
I always liked sports as a kid, and I always liked to write too. So I guess it was just sort of putting those two things together. When I got to college, I knew I wanted to be in journalism somehow. I wasn't sure exactly what I would do, but I started working for the student newspaper, and started in the sports department, and just really enjoyed it, and got more and more into it doing that. And it didn't take long before I realized that I wanted to try to turn it into a career.
I mentioned in the intro that you went to Syracuse, and I've heard stories that in journalism classes there at SU, because the Newhouse School of Communications is so widely renowned internationally, if you had the slightest spelling mistake on an assignment, a journalism assignment, it was an F. Is that true?
That was true with my newspaper. A couple of the newspaper classes I took, in fact, if you did a story and there was a factual error in the story, then you got an F on that particular assignment. And frankly, I have no problem with that policy. Your most fundamental goal in journalism is to be accurate and be correct. If you're covering a basketball game and you write this brilliant story about the game but got the final score wrong, nobody cares how good your story was because you got the final score wrong. So, it was really a way to underscore to us just how important it was to be right.
I mean, I don't understand how someone could do a story, make it sound good, and completely mess up the score. But
you'd be I could tell you there were many nights when I would wake up in the middle of the night, just thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, did I get the score right? Did the leading scorer have 25 points or was it 23 points?" You're on deadline and there's a lot of numbers and a lot of material to sort through, and the mistakes can happen. It's you really have to make a point of going back through everything that you file, and double checking everything and making sure it's all correct. And I know it sounds like I was probably obsessive about it, but it's true, and I think every journalist should be that way. If you're going to obsess over something, it should be about the facts.
Absolutely. And would you say sports reporting is more difficult? You covered news for a few months in between Siena basketball and there was another sports opening, and you took that. But when you were doing your news reporting, did you find that more difficult than sports reporting?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't say so. It was fun in a lot of ways. One of the biggest differences in sports, everything is very structured. You go over to a game and you know when it's going to start, and they're going to give you stats at the game, and then you're ushered into a press conference, where you're allowed to interview people, and there's just sort of a structure to everything. One thing I sort of enjoyed about being a news reporter was when something happened, you just hop in your car and drive down to the scene and go around, and it was much more. You have much more freedom to just sort of go around and collect whatever information you need to collect to come back and write the story. If you're going to the scene of a fire or a building collapsing or something like that, it's not like you get down there and they set up a press conference with the person whose house collapsed or the neighbors. You have to go out and find that on your own, and I really enjoyed that part of it.
So you like the challenging aspect of searching for the information versus sports, the information sort of comes to you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily more challenging that way, though. Sometimes in sports, the fact that information comes to you, is not necessarily a good thing, because you don't want your story to sound like everybody else's story, and everybody else was at the press conference and everybody else watched the game. So you really have to work hard to have something in your story that nobody else is going to have. It's something that makes people want to read your story as opposed to the next guy's story. That I think is one of the hardest things about sports writing.
And how do you deal with making your story sound different from the other guys?
You have to do it in the reporting, not so much in the writing. Sometimes it's, if I went to a practice, and there's a couple other reporters there who are also covering Siena, let's say, and we're all talking to the same people, and maybe we're all going to write about the same thing. I would always ask myself, who can I talk to that's going to make this different from their story? Is there a phone call I can make? If we're all writing about the same player, can I call his dad? Can I call his mom? Can I call his high school English teacher? I don't know. What can I do to give my story just that extra little bit of perspective or that extra little detail that the other guy's story is not going to have?
That's really interesting because I think student journalists, and I'm guilty of this too, get caught up in the different styles that people write with. And yours is, I would definitely say, one of the most conversational styles I've ever read.
Yeah, I think, though, the writing is really formed from the reporting. If you have everything you need to have in front of you, then to me the writing just comes naturally. But you can't write your way out of a reporting problem. If there's a hole in the story, you can't write your way around it. You need the information to make the story complete. And it just makes the writing easier when you have more information to work with. I'll go back to the scenario there where you're making an extra phone call, after a practice. Maybe I call the player's mom and get this great anecdote about, something he did when he was a kid. And now maybe that all of a sudden is, I couldn't figure out what the lead was to the story, but hey, now that's it. Now I've got this great anecdote that I can lead with. It says something about the player, and it also says something about the player that my competition's not going to have. So now I've done a lot of things. I've, one, made my writing easier, and two, I've given myself a step up over the competition.
It's really interesting. And I want to shift gears now. You, as a sports editor, and thankfully so, you pride yourself on covering local sports. Certainly there was nothing going on yesterday because it was just an avalanche. But what do you find is the most interesting aspect of covering local sports? For instance, you have some great high school teams in the area and great college basketball and hockey. I mean, what's the most interesting aspect of it?
Whether you're covering, whether it's a high school sports or the Super Bowl, to me the most fun part about covering sports is always been the people, the characters. Most great stories come from a great character, and that doesn't just mean that you're doing a personality profile. It could be an issue story, but if you could tell that story through a person and their story, it's going to make what you're writing that much more compelling. So I just enjoy the opportunity to get out and meet people and talk to people and hear their stories, so I can turn around and share them.
And it looks like certainly high school wise, we have some great college basketball and track and field at Albany High. The ECACs in hockey with Special Union and RPI. We're going to be looking at some sports action here locally for a while.
Yeah, March is always a really fun month for us because you have all the college basketball teams in their tournaments, and just about every year somebody gets in the NCAA tournament, whether it's the U Albany or the Siena men's programs, or the U Albany women's program has become so good now that they're probably a pretty good bet to get to the NCAA tournament. The college hockey teams between Union and RPI, the past few years, one of them has been in the NCAA tournament. So once you get into March, you've also got the high school season starts to wind down, so you have sectionals and the state tournament, and the state wrestling tournament is at Times Union Center, so that's right here in town. There's just a lot going on in the month of March, but that's good. That makes it fun.
What's your favorite sport to cover out of all those?
Growing up, I was probably a bigger hockey fan than anything else, so I still do enjoy doing that. Although, covering basketball as a beat for 5 years, I just learned so much about the game that I really learned to appreciate basketball, I think, and I feel like it's probably the sport I know the most about now. So that that makes it more enjoyable to cover that sport too.
Did you play basketball or hockey at all as a kid?
Never played hockey. Played basketball just sort of recreationally as a kid, but never good enough at to be a high school standout or anything like that.
What was your favorite shot to take?
The one that I could make, which wasn't many.
Well, practice. That's when you just practice your free throws.
Yeah, exactly. That was funny. I wrote a column about that last year. I talked to a gentleman who goes to the YMCA every day and made it his personal goal to see how many free throws in a row he could make. And he was pretty obsessive about it. He kept track of it. He was keeping his own free throw stats, so he could tell you like what his free throw percentage was over the course of an entire year. And it was something crazy. It was like 97% or something like that. So the way I did that story was by having him teach me how to shoot free throws, and I'm not ashamed to say that I actually airballed the second one. So.
What about the first?
The first did not go in either. At least it hit the rim.
Oh, there you go. So there's obviously quite a bit of mechanics to shooting a free throw?
Yes, more than I could master.
And how much? There's got to be a mental part of that too, Pete, I would imagine.
Yeah, probably, but I'm not sure I mastered that part either. The person I wrote about certainly did. He was just effortless.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And the Olympics are coming up tonight on NBC. They start at 8 with the snowboarding. How avidly do you typically follow the Olympics?
Pretty avidly, I would say, especially since I kind of need to know what's going on to make sure we have a representative amount of coverage in the paper the next day. The tricky thing about the Olympics is always the timing. Is stuff is not, because of the time zone differences, stuff is not always happening that's necessarily on the ideal cycle for us. This Olympics, for instance, a lot of stuff is going to be happening early in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, which is good because it means that everything will be done well in advance of our deadlines. The unfortunate thing is, though, by the time the paper comes out the next morning, everything that's happened the day before is already stale. Nobody wants to read a game story from a hockey game that was over a full 24 hours earlier. So we have to keep that in mind, too, as we're trying to decide what Olympic stories are going to go in the paper each day.
Although I would imagine that it's much easier now than it probably has ever been in terms of dealing with time zones where when the Olympics are going on, the time zone is ahead of ours simply because of all the info you can access on the web.
That's true. And, it does present its own set of problems, too, when you have the opposite where, stuff is all happening at 1 or 2 in the morning, very, very late our time, because then, it's happening right on deadline and you're trying to get as much into the paper as you can, but, because of deadlines, you can't necessarily. But then, you don't just put it in the next day's paper because at that point it's too late. Everybody knows about it already. So you end up writing a lot of stories not necessarily about what happened, but about what is going to happen the next day.
So more or less preview stories.
Exactly.
Okay, and I have to say, I'm so glad that you're not over there covering it for, I don't know if you've heard some of the horror stories about the hotels and whatnot.
I've seen a lot of pictures of toilets on Twitter in the last couple days.
Yeah, it's not pretty. I guess either there's just some plumbing issues, and I heard another thing this morning that the U.S. couldn't bring in a pallet of Chobani Greek yogurt. I guess because of commerce. Did you hear about this?
That one I had not heard, but I had seen a lot of the pictures and heard a lot of the stories of people having problems with their hotel rooms and things not quite being done yet.
And it's really, you just try and figure out how you wrap your head around this, because it's not like Sochi didn't have 7 years to plan for all this.
No, and I would think for the people of Russia who've spent what is it, $51 billion
Yeah.
or something absurd like that to build all this, then that they would certainly be demanding some answers. But as for the people who are covering it, I think most of them have had a pretty good sense of humor about it, and also kept in mind that there are journalists around the world in war zones and in very dangerous places. When you think about that, it kind of puts in perspective, the issues like not having enough light bulbs or a shower curtain or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I heard something this morning where someone was trading light bulbs for some other thing. It's escaping me right now, but
yeah, it sounds like some of the reporters have like their own black market going on there, swapping, whatever necessities they may need that are lacking.
And how concerned are you, if at all, in terms of the safety of this Olympics? Because the last time we were worried about something like this was probably Park City, and even before then in Munich in 1972.
Yeah, I think everybody should be concerned about it, because for as much time and money has gone into the security effort over there, there's I'm sure there's unfortunately a lot of time also being spent by people with bad intentions trying to figure out a way to exploit whatever holes in the security there may be. So I think it'd be hard for us to find anybody who's not worried about it, and it's just sort of a sign of the world we live in, I guess.
Sure, and President Vladimir Putin, he has said that this is going to be the safest Olympics ever. Maybe this is just me being cynical, Pete, but I don't think so.
Well, I certainly hope it is. That's for sure. But I don't know. It sounds like a lot of money has been spent on security, and a lot of time has gone into preparing for the security too. So those are all obviously good things, and you just hope that the threat of something happening, or God forbid something happening, doesn't become the predominant storyline.
Sure. I mean, we have just a few minutes left, but do you have any Olympic predictions for us?
Not particularly. I always enjoy watching the men's ice hockey. So I hope we get a medal game between the U.S. and Canada. I think that's always fun when that happens.
I think that has a legitimate possibility of happening. I mean,
yeah, it certainly sounds that way.
I mean, what is it? You have we have Ryan Callahan here for the U.S., and we have three solid goalies: Ryan Miller, did Ben Bishop get shafted? Jimmy Howard, and one of the other goalies there. Is it Ben Bishop? I'm blanking right now.
Yeah, you might be right. I'm not 100% sure.
Is either he got there or got shafted, because he's had a great year. And certainly Team Canada with LeCavalier and Rick Nash, and I mean, it's really going to be just such a fantastic Olympics in terms of hockey.
Yeah, and then by the time they get back, it becomes we're almost ready for the NHL playoffs too. So yeah, if you're a hockey fan, this is a fun few months for sure.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they used to send college kids over to the Olympics?
That's correct. Yep. It was professionals didn't take part, so it was the U.S. would send college players.
Do you think they should revert back to that, or keep it how it is?
I don't know. I'm sort of on the fence about it, I guess. There's an argument to be made that you want the Olympics to be the best players in the world. And obviously a lot of those guys are playing in the NHL, so if you want that to happen, you have to shut the NHL down for a few weeks and give them a chance to go over there and play. But there are people out there, and I do see their side of it, who sort of liked giving the amateurs, the college players, their a chance to be in the spotlight for a little while, and it sort of gives the U.S. sort of more of that underdog kind of feel to it. So I don't know. I see both sides of it, I guess, though. I mean, I do enjoy watching it this way. Seeing the best players in the world play against each other in a tournament like that, it's hard to say that's a bad thing.
I mean, and let's face it, too. It brings people in front of their TV sets.
Yep, that's for sure.
Which, no disrespect to college hockey at all, but, people have a tendency to just kind of, I don't want to necessarily say don't care about college hockey, but it's very hard to come by people that do.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not the same interest level when you're watching the same guys you see on TV every night in the NHL, versus guys you probably haven't heard of before.
Sure. Have you covered or heard of, or what do you think of the bobsled team this year, the U.S. four-man bobsled team?
Boy, I'd really be lying to you if I said that I could break down the U.S. bobsled chances with any sort of authority. The one thing I will tell you, I know for sure though, is the people who do those sliding sports, whether it's bobsled or a luge or a skeleton, certainly have a lot more courage than I do, because you would not find me going down that track at 80 miles an hour, however fast it is. With only a few inches separating my face from the ice.
Well, I thank you so much for saying that, because my dad, he did skeleton sliding for about 17 years. My sister's done luge, and I drove bobsleds for a few years.
How about that? Good for you.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you, it's really fun. I did bobsledding for that reason, because I didn't want my face that close to the ice.
Yeah, if I had to pick of the three, if I had to pick one, it'd probably be a bobsled. Maybe I would be a good brake man, so I wouldn't even have to look really.
Well, the thing with braking is, you have to help push. I mean, it's all a team effort, of course, and I have to tell you, pushing a bobsled and then trying to get in it is not exactly the easiest feat in the world to accomplish.
No, I would not imagine so. I probably wouldn't be very good at any of the things. Is there a passenger seat? That might be the place for me.
Well, in the four-man, there are two other spots, so we could throw you in there.
All right. Well, maybe that's my place, one of those two spots.
So, in terms of who do you think is going to win the NCAA tournament this year? College hoops.
As a proud Syracuse alum, I could certainly tell you who I hope wins the NCAA tournament this year.
I think they have a really good shot. They're number one right now. Did you see that game against Duke?
I did. Yeah, that was that's probably one of the best regular season college basketball games I've ever seen. What a terrific game! It made me wish that I had gotten myself in the building somehow, because it must have been a great atmosphere to experience too.
Indeed, for sure. Well, Pete, we are just about out of time on this edition of The Conversation. It has really been a delight to have you on, and I thank you so much for being so giving of your time last week to our sports journalism class, and now here on The Conversation. Very much appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for thinking of me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Conversation on Radio St. Rose. If you have any questions or comments about the show, I would love to read them. My email address is Bryant, BRYANTB587 @strose.edu. You may also submit them via our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Radio St. Rose Conversation. Until next time, I'm Blaise Bryant.